Hey, Limitless family, wanted to give you a midweek Devo talking about this upcoming week's chapter. Maybe this could be a regular thing where I touch on the chapter a little bit and gives us some context as we're moving into it, give you some reminders moving into this next week. So for example, we're looking at Revelations chapter 2. Alright, so go ahead and read that this week. That way it's not your first time reading it when we come together. Hey, guess what? Little clue that's also going to help you with the narration. If you're more familiar with the passage, have read it multiple times, that's going to help you with the narration. Alright, so let's go ahead, read over that. Also go back and review chapter 1 because we're gonna, talk about, hey, what did we discuss last week? What were some of the takeaways? How did that go? All right, we want to make sure we do that before jumping into chapter 2. And so as we go into chapter 2, I want to share some things with you real quick. All right, so we have in Romans chapter 2. Why do I keep on saying Romans? We did Romans, right? Revelations. Chapter 2, it starts off like this. To the angel of the church in Ephesus. Right. So, remember we talked about this a little bit last week with that term angel. And we wrote it in blue, underlined it in red, or we wrote it in black, and then we put blue and red to show that, this is what the term says within scripture, and it can also be translated as messenger. Actually, messenger makes really good sense with this chapter and with the letters that are going forward. So I just want to give you some understanding of why I say that and hopefully some application for us from that. All right. First, it says writing to the angel, right? To the angel of the church in Ephesus, right? So seems kind of weird, first of all, if the prophet was writing to angels, to heavenly beings. So this seems to be going to a person in Ephesus, right? Some looks at that term, that Greek term that's used is also translated as messenger. And so if you actually look at the Berean literal translation and the Young's literal translation versions of scripture, they will actually use the word messenger there. Many commentators take this to be written to the bishop, senior pastor, or senior elder of the church, whoever is the one in charge, right? The main primary leader, the bishop. That person is the one that's receiving this letter. All right? That's what a lot of commentators say. And also, going along with that, some commentators mention that this could actually be, this elder, this bishop there in Ephesus could be Timothy. That's right, Timothy, the one that Paul wrote 1st and 2nd Timothy to. It could actually be that Timothy. Now, there's discrepancies on that. There's disagreements on who it could have been. Some say maybe it was the bishop that Timothy passed the leadership down to, or some other bishop that John had set in place in Ephesus. But it's interesting that this could have actually been Timothy, right? And so, looking at that, I'm not supposed to be looking at this camera, but every now and again, I'm getting used to this, guys. All right, I'm getting used to this. And again, this is all an experiment, just trying to see how this works out. So, not all of us will take on this kind of position, right? Not all of us are going to take on the position of a bishop and a lead elder or pastor of a church, right? So, knowing that this letter was written to that individual, to that person, let's think about some takeaways that we could take from this, some things to keep in mind as we're reading through these letters that are going out to these angels or messengers or bishops, right? What are some things to keep in mind? So first of all, we may not all have this position, but we are all human. Right? So that means we're all susceptible. We are all can potentially walk into the same errors that these people were walking into. So that's something to keep in mind. We can read these warnings, these letters, these errors or the applause or praise. For example, with Ephesus, there's praise and there's warning, right? And so we need to keep in mind that, hey, we're capable of these things, these praise things, just like they were, because we're people too, right? And we're also capable of these errors, just like they were, because we're people too, right? So that's the first thing. We are all human, so we're capable of similar errors and similar success, and we are all entrusted with the gospel message. We are all entrusted with the gospel message and called to discipleship. So if we can think of this in terms of, this is a person, this is a human being, a believer, a follower of Christ, just like you and me. We're all entrusted with this message of the gospel, of the good news. We're all messengers in that respect, right? We're all disciples of Christ. And in that, we can take and see what God is saying to these people, these also fellow believers, these fellow disciples of Christ, and we can apply that to ourselves, or know that this could apply to us, all right? So seeing how these letters were directed to individual believers, I want us this next week, as we come together, we're going to consider, what would God have written to us? Or what could God write to us if he were to write us a letter? And I mean, it's interesting how short these letters are, right? Or at least how short the direct word is to each of these pastors. Now, you have to think, this full book is going to be passed through these churches. So not only is the angel, the elder, the bishop, the messenger at Ephesus going to read the warning to him, all of the other churches are also going to read that same warning to him, knowing that, it was directed specifically to him. But just like they did in that time, we too should take that and say, okay, we need to be cautious of this within our own life as well. All right? So I want you guys to think about maybe some things that if God were to write you a letter, what would he say? What would be that thing that he directs specifically towards you? All right? And then lastly, this is something interesting. As we look at this, these stars being the angels in the churches, the messengers in the churches, these bishops in these churches, as we see that, we need to also reflect back on chapter 1. Because where were these stars? First, you see the stars are the angels, the messengers, right? Possibly these bishops. And then the candlesticks were the churches. And now both of those are going to be referenced still, right? Even to Ephesus, he mentions the candlestick. So keep in mind that candlestick is the churches, and Jesus is in the midst of the candlesticks, right? He's in the midst of the churches. He's in our midst, Limitless family. He is in our midst. He's in not just our midst, but the midst of his body, the big C church, all around our community, all around the world. Jesus is moving in the midst of these churches, right? And he's moving in the midst of our church. And then secondly, he's holding these stars in his hands. And something that's really interesting about that is that with him holding the stars in his hands, that means that, he's saying, look, I'm the one that's in control. I'm here. I'm the one that cares for you. I'm the one who appoints you. I'm the one who removes you, right? They're in his hands. And that's not just something for the messengers, the bishops, to keep in mind. You and I, as messengers of God, because he's placed all of us somewhere, right? He's appointed all of us somewhere. And it may not be appointing over a church, but maybe he's appointed you in your workplace. Maybe he's appointed you with your family. Maybe he's appointed you with your friend group, with your school campus, right? Maybe he's appointed you with your dancing group. Maybe he's appointed you in these different places. And you need to know that he's the one that is in control. He's the one that cares for you. He's the one that has set you in these places. He's also the one that can remove you from these places. All right? And these places of influence that he gives, expecting us to be messengers, expecting us to be disciples and light in the midst of this world. All right? So that's something to keep in mind. Because we also, not just these messengers, but we also have been, we are in the nail-pierced hands of Jesus. We are in his control. He's the one that's in control. He's the one that cares for us. We are in his caring, nail-pierced hands. We are appointed by him. We can also be removed by him. And so